Hello, everyone. I'm an old man that'll be 60 years old this year. My first grandchild was born 3 years ago. I'll tell you something. I've met all sorts of people from all over the world. I've dealt with my fair share of crazy people and weirdos too. But among all of them, there's one person who stands out for being the biggest lunatic. That person is none other than my wife. It might have something to do with the fact she's 10 years younger than me. She's extremely self-centered. She always does what's easiest for her, even if it affects other people. Not only that, she's extremely pushy and abrasive when she doesn't get what she wants. No matter how many times we'd talk about it, she never changed her behavior. In the end, I just gave up and tried to not let it bother me. However, there's no way I could ignore what she did to me recently. It was unforgivable and earth-shattering. 3 years ago, my son graduated from a military academy. He got married immediately after and had a child not soon after. One day, he showed up at our house with his son and his wife. He had a request for my wife. He explained that his salary alone wouldn't be enough to support the family. They decided that his wife would have to go start working too. He asked if my wife could watch his son for him during the week while they were at work. He said it would only be until he was old enough to be enrolled in preschool. He offered to give us $1,000 a month if she agreed. I didn't like the idea of my wife watching my grandson. She isn't capable of caring about anyone else but herself. I don't think they realized at the time what a poor choice this was. Regardless, my wife said she agreed to watch their son. I was retiring soon, so I'd be at the house more often. I'd be able to watch him sometimes instead of my wife. We told our son we'd agree to watch our grandchild. I was nervous for the times I wouldn't be there to look after him. My wife was the last person who should have the responsibility of watching a child. Soon after, my son and his family moved into a house close to ours. After my daughter-in-law's maternity leave ended, she went back to work and we started watching our grandson. He was a little over a year. He was just learning how to walk around then. He was the most adorable child I've ever seen in my life. It brought me back to when my son was that age. He and my grandson were almost identical. It warmed my heart to see him and think back on those times. I had some errands to run later that day, but I wanted to play with my grandson for about an hour or so before I left. I was pretending to chase him around the house to help him with walking. We played with all his favorite toys. That was when I heard the front door open. I went over to see who was here. But it wasn't someone coming. It was my wife who had left. I thought maybe she went to bring the garbage down to the curb, but after a minute or two, she didn't come back into the house. 5, 10, 30 minutes passed and she wasn't back in the house. I called her to see what she was doing. I asked her where she was and told that I needed to leave soon. "Why aren't you back yet?" I asked her. She said she had gone out to take care of something. She told me she'd be home soon, so just watch Robbie for a little while longer. I firmly told her, "You need to come back as soon as you can. I need to go to the bank before it gets too crowded. I have plans to have lunch with a friend." I waited and waited, but she never came home. She didn't pick up her phone either. I told her exactly when I needed to meet my friend, but she still wasn't back. If I waited much longer, I was going to be late. I reluctantly called up the friend I was supposed to meet. I told him, "Hey, Billy, listen, I'm stuck at home right now watching my grandson. My wife was supposed to be back by now, but she's still not home and she's not picking up her phone. I'm really sorry, but I think we're going to have to reschedule." My friend said he understood and that it was no problem. "Don't worry about it. Let me know when you're free and we can go out another time." I hated canceling plans at the last minute. It made me look bad when it was really my wife's fault. I was considerably angry at my wife for taking her sweet time to come back. She finally came back to the house around 3:00. "Where were you?" I asked angrily. "Thanks to you, I had to break my plans with my friend." She didn't seem concerned at all. Well, I wanted to come back sooner, but I got caught up in a few things and lost track of time. She didn't apologize and made it seem like she didn't have to. I fired back at her. You said you'd watch Robbie, so that's what you need to do. You have a responsibility now that you can't ignore. You're not watching someone's pet. You're watching your own grandchild. She rolled her eyes and sat down next to little Robbie. Not long after, my daughter-in-law came to pick up her son. Of course, my wife pretended like she had been watching him all day and told her how her son had been a good little boy. Of course, my daughter-in-law believed my wife. She had no reason not to. I wanted to speak up, but I bit my tongue. What I wanted to say was she doesn't deserve any credit because she didn't do anything. I was the one who watched Robbie from the morning until 3. 0. She was out shopping and doing God knows what all day. I didn't want to make a scene, so I stayed quiet. It only took a few days for my suspicions to be confirmed. My wife had no intention whatsoever to watch her grandson. In the morning, when my daughter-in-law would come to drop off Robbie, my wife would be there to greet her and take him into the house. That was basically the only interaction she had with Robbie throughout the day. As soon as she put him in the living room with me, she'd do her disappearing act and wouldn't come home until a few minutes before Robbie was supposed to be picked up. I'd call her every time she left the house and she'd say the same thing. I won't be out for long. Of course, that was a lie. She was gone nearly the whole time Robbie was at the house. I scolded her and asked, "Why did you agree to watch him in the first place if you weren't actually planning on ever watching him?" I'm not the one who said yes. You did. I have things to do. He's your responsibility. She gave me an attitude. You're a parent. How could you say such a cruel thing like that? You're going to abandon your own grandchild. All you need to do is play with him and put him down for a nap. You talk about responsibility, but that's your responsibility as a grandfather. It's the least you can do. If you can't do that, you don't deserve to see him at all. I yelled, "You agreed to this. You're the reason why he's here right now. How could you pin this on me?" My wife responded, "It should be obvious that I was speaking for the both of us. Don't you think it's strange? If only I watched him. It's both of our jobs to look after our grandson. It's ridiculous to say I should be the only one to take care of him." Things were getting heated. It was obvious she had no intention of changing her mind, and we couldn't take back her offer to watch him. I had no idea my retirement was going to be like this. I planned on spending my time on my terms, not being forced to be a babysitter. She wasn't even making sense. She kept saying how it was our responsibility, when really, I was the only one watching him. She claimed that she was busy during the day and always had to run out to do errands. Then, she had to get dinner ready once she came home. She probably spent a total of 10 minutes watching him. If that. To make it worse, she'd keep most of the money my daughter-in-law was giving her to watch Robbie. She'd take 80 of it and throw me the leftover 20. I was basically watching Robbie on my own. How did she figure she deserved nearly all of that money? When I confronted her about taking too much money, she said, "Of course I deserve more than you. I have to cook, clean, and do the laundry. I think I should be getting more, but I was nice enough to let you have a share." I scolded her and said, "You've been using my retirement fund to do those things. Why should you get money on top of that?" She turned her nose in the air and said, "I'm doing more now that Robbie's here. I deserve more for all the work I'm doing." That retirement money is a different story. I felt like I was talking to a tree stump. No matter what I said or what logic I used, it was totally useless. My blood pressure was through the roof. I shouldn't have to argue ridiculous things like this at my age. Eventually, I just gave up. That wasn't the last of her antics, though. Once the weather got nicer, I didn't want to stay cooped up all day in the house with Robbie. We'd hold hands and go for walks. He liked the park, so we'd go there a lot, too. I loved playing in the park with him. especially on the playground. While I was at the park one day, I met an elderly woman who was there too. She was watching her grandchild too. She introduced herself and said her name was Evelyn. I guess I shouldn't say elderly since she was only 2 years older than me. However, the only way I could tell she was a grandmother was because she had her granddaughter with her. She looked really good for her age. You'd never think she was older than me. It was a coincidence we were both at the same park with our grandchildren when we met. We talked all about looking after our grandchildren. We talked about things like how old our grandchildren were, what we were feeding them, what we would play with them. We actually became quite friendly with one another. Robbie really loved being at the park with the other kids. He liked being with me, but of course, he liked being around other kids his age too, especially Evelyn's granddaughter. My new friend and I exchanged numbers. We would always get in touch with one another before going to the park with our grandchildren. One day, I got a call from Evelyn. She told me the library she volunteers at was having a class for children. She explained it was a sensory development class. It's designed to hone young children's 5 senses. She asked me if I wanted to go with Robbie. She said she was going with her granddaughter. I said I would be happy to go. It ended up being really fun. There were a lot of 3D puzzles and interactive activities for the children. It was a great mix of being educational and fun for them. Both our grandkids had a blast. This type of thing wasn't around when my son was young. I was pretty amazed about how the world has changed to promote development in children. I told Evelyn that I really loved the class. Is this just a one-time event? I'd really love to have Robbie do more of this type of thing. She told me that the library holds classes like this every week. We both signed up our grandkids for weekly classes. I brought Robbie there every Wednesday. Every other day, he and I would go to play in the park together. At first, Evelyn and I signed up for different days for the classes. But parking at the library was always really full, and it was hard to find a spot. I offered to drive Evelyn and her granddaughter, so she changed to the same day as Robbie. It actually worked out well since they lived on the way to the library. She thanked me by always baking me cookies and giving Robbie cute little treats. One time, she brought out a full apple pie. She even knitted him a pair of mittens to match a pair she made for her granddaughter. Things were going great for about 6 months. That was until my wife came into the picture. One day when I was home with Robbie, my wife went out as usual. This time, she didn't go shopping. She went to Evelyn's house. She accused her of having an affair with me. She made a huge scene, screaming about how Evelyn was a homewrecker and how she was trying to bring shame to my wife. I guess she caught on that we were spending a lot of time at the park together, so she thought it meant we were having an affair. Evelyn's husband heard the commotion and came outside. My wife explained to him how Evelyn and I were spending so much time together and how she believed we were having an affair. My wife demanded he keep a close eye on her from now on. She started accusing him for what she thought is going on. This is your fault. You should have realized what was going on. You have no idea what your own wife is doing once she leaves the house. How could you have been so oblivious? She was the one who was oblivious. How could she jump to conclusions not knowing anything at all? Only a lunatic would go to a random person's house and accuse them of having an affair without knowing any details or have any proof. She screamed so loud the entire neighborhood could hear it. I felt so bad. Knowing Evelyn, she definitely lived a quiet life. Well, she didn't that day. Her husband finally had a chance to speak and told my wife that Evelyn was watching their granddaughter when she left the house. Of course my wife wasn't buying that, her tantrum went on. The next day, Evelyn called me, "Tell me what happened." "What's wrong with your wife?" She came over here and made a huge scene. "What did you tell her?" "You must have mentioned something to set her off and make her mad enough to storm down to my house and scream at me." She told me the details of what happened. I was mortified. I had no idea my wife had gone and done that. I told her that, and that I had no idea what was going through her head. I apologized over and over again. I felt horrible. I asked her if everything was okay with her husband. I said I would go clear everything up and talk with her if it would make things better. She said, "I don't think that's a good idea. If your wife finds out you came over here, she's going to go even crazier. I think it's best if we cut off communication. Please delete my number. I'm going to do the same. Let's just pretend like we don't know each other if we run into one another at the park." At my age, I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would have someone scream at me like that. The entire neighborhood was listening. It was a total embarrassment. I had no idea what went through my wife's head. I sincerely apologized one last time to Evelyn, then I hung up the phone. She was such a sweet woman. We were in the same boat with watching our grandchildren, but even beyond that, we became good friends. Leave it to my wife to ruin something like that. Even for her, this was a new low. Things weren't hectic just for Evelyn and her family. My wife came back from her visit with Evelyn right as my daughter-in-law was coming to pick up Robbie. She looked frantic and barked at my daughter-in-law. "Call Jimmy over here right now. We need to talk." My son came to the house and my wife made us all sit down at the kitchen table to talk. At this point, I had no idea what she had done yet or where she had been. This was before I had my phone call with Evelyn. I sat and listened to my wife as she shouted, "Your worthless father is having an affair." We sat there stunned, looking at her. That was a very bold thing to claim, so we all were shocked and confused. My daughter-in-law interjected, "Mom, what are you talking about?" My wife then produced a picture of Evelyn and I at the park. Who knows when she took it? It was a picture of her and I sitting on a bench together. Not only that, she also had pictures of her and I in the car together. My son and daughter-in-law stared down at the pictures. My wife arrogantly shouted out as she presented her evidence, "Look at this. Your deadbeat father is spending all his time with some random woman. Look here. Here he is getting a cake from her. She was even cooking dinner for him. Look!" I did my research on this woman. I followed her. She used her grandchild as an excuse to get closer to him and started going on dates with him. They were going all around town together, parading their affair for everyone to see. What a pathetic, lonely woman. Look at her. You can tell she's good old hag. She threw down another picture. Here they are sneaking around the library together. They used their grandchildren as a cover for their love affair. She folded her arms and waited for our reaction to her detective work. My son and daughter-in-law silently looked at me. I could see they were saying with their eyes, "Dad, how could you do something like this?" It killed me to see them look at me that way. I was being labeled as a cheating old man. It was so obviously not true, but for some reason I couldn't find the words to object to what she was saying. I had to defend myself, but I was stunned and speechless. After a few seconds, I snapped out of it. "An affair? How could you say something so stupid?" She and I met each other at the park when our grandkids started playing together. We both went to a class for the kids at the library together. I drove us all there. That's why we were in the car together. I stated my defense and waited to see how she'd react. To no one's surprise, my explanation didn't matter at all. It was like I was speaking in a completely different language. She didn't listen to a word I said. To be honest, even if she did listen, it wouldn't have made a difference. She screamed, "How dare you do this to me? I work myself to the bone for you. Is this how you repay me for everything I do? How could you cheat on me? That woman is the devil. She probably pressured you into this, even though she knew you were married. All it took was a few cookies to seduce you. You weak-minded fool. You and her both make me sick." What else did she do? How deep does your adultery go? What did you say to her? Did you promise her that you'd get a divorce so you could be with her? She wasn't jumping to conclusions. She was pole vaulting to them. She was psychotically trying to uncover this fictitious affair she thought I was having. I naively tried to reason with her and tell her she was being ridiculous. She was having none of it. I said, "I won't sit here and be called a cheater and a liar. It's completely unacceptable. You're jumping to conclusions with no evidence other than us being friends. You need to put an end to this right now." She kept frantically spitting out one ridiculous thing after another. I tried one final time to defend myself. "I'll say this one last time. Evelyn is just a friend. Nothing more." We met when Robbie and her granddaughter started playing at the park together. They became good friends. I got in touch with her when Robbie and I went to the park so he could play with his new little friend. We went to a sensory development class at the library. Robbie and her granddaughter both loved it, so we signed them up for more classes. You saw her in the car with me because we went to those classes together. There was nothing more for me to say. That was the truth, whether my wife accepted it or not. It fell on deaf ears. My wife continued to berate me. I've never heard of a person in an affair coming out and saying, "Yes, I'm having an affair." Of course, you'd come up with that elaborate story. Cheaters always make stories to try and save themselves. And trust me, I know plenty of people who've had an affair like you. Don't try and act like there was nothing going on between you two. You were spending every day together. Do you think I'm stupid? I've seen women like her before. They act all nice and innocent to get close to a man, then prey on him for money. And you, being the weak-minded idiot you are, fell for her tricks. From this day forward, I'm controlling all the finances in the house. Give me all your debit and credit cards. Not to mention all the money we get from watching Robbie. That's all coming to me from now on. I told her there was no way that was going to happen. I had already given her access to an account I put half of my retirement money in. We agreed that would be our main source of money, but we would also have our own separate accounts for personal spending. I flat out refused to give her control of my personal account. She claimed, "I know that horrible woman is after the money, and I don't trust you enough not to give it to her. I have to monitor it so that doesn't happen. You should be thanking me. I'm saving our finances. Otherwise, that witch would bankrupt us." She kept going on and on about how this was the way things had to be. Nothing I say is going to get through to you. You're completely ignoring the truth. It's not worth it anymore to waste my time trying to explain the same thing over and over again to you. I turned to my son and his wife. Your mother has lost her grip with reality. You two should leave. I'll deal with her. That's when I realized the worst-case scenario was happening. It seemed like they actually believed her. They believed my wife over me. The whole thing left me exhausted and with a splitting headache. When my son and his family left, the battle with my wife raged on. How could you accuse me of that in front of them? You have absolutely no clue what you're talking about. What's wrong with you? She claimed I have all the proof I need. It's right here. You and her spending all your time together. You discuss me having an affair at your age. I shouted back. I have to take care of Robbie all on my own, and now I have to deal with you accusing me of this? I've had enough! Starting tomorrow, you're going to watch him. Stop with your excuses. It's time you take responsibility. Not surprisingly, she refused. You think I'd let you run free like that? Absolutely not. Who knows what you'd do if I was stuck home with Robbie all day? I want you at the house with Robbie. I don't trust you on your own. End of discussion. How low does a person have to be to use their own grandchild as the entryway into an affair? It's deplorable. If I'm honest, I didn't know I would feel this bad even if I actually had an affair and got caught. My life was a mess because of an affair that I never had. I never imagined my retirement would be like this. I felt like I was losing my mind. If you thought that's where things ended, you'd be wrong. It happened about 2 months later. What happened next made it seem like the fiasco over my fictional affair seemed like nothing. My wife, at 50 years old, was pregnant. She found out when she was already 16 weeks pregnant. She mentioned that she hadn't been menstruating lately. She thought it was because she was going through menopause. She said something felt off. She also said she was feeling sick, like she felt when she was pregnant with our son all those years ago. When she went to the doctor to get it all checked out, she found out she was pregnant. I had no idea. I didn't notice any of the signs that she was pregnant. Here is where things get complicated. We barely said 2 words to each other after she accused me of having an affair. It goes without saying that we weren't intimate at all after that. She barely looked in my direction. There was only one occasion I can remember that she tried to be intimate with me. It was very out of the ordinary. She hadn't approached me like that in years. I wanted to stop her. I asked her what had gotten into her. I couldn't resist her advances. Eventually, I gave in to the temptation. I knew I shouldn't, but I did it anyway. It was a night of passion that I hadn't experienced with my wife in years. A month later, my wife came up to me while I was sleeping. She woke me up and whispered that she was pregnant. I couldn't believe it. What do you mean you're pregnant? At your age? She laughed and said, What about my age? I'm not that old. Women can still have a baby at my age. Don't get our ages mixed up. I'm still only 50. If I were 60 like you, then it'd be a different story. It's not that weird for a woman my age to be pregnant. Have you already forgotten about the night we had? Don't act so surprised. I didn't believe it. A man my age shouldn't be able to get a woman pregnant that easily. I told her there had to be a mistake. My wife told me that it was easy for a woman to get pregnant if a lot of time had passed since the last time she had relations with a man. I don't want to hear any more doubts out of your mouth, she said. Even if you don't believe it, that doesn't change the fact that it happened. At first, I was feeling a mixture of shock and disappointment. I was about to be a father again at 60 years old. The more I thought about the more excited I stared to feel. My grandson was so cute and I loved playing with him. If I had another child of my own, I know it'd be even cuter. A child is a child no matter when it comes into your life. It needs to be cared for and loved. People might snicker at us for having a baby at this age. I didn't care. I was going to love this child more than anything in the world. I said to my wife, You need to take extra care of your body now. Even though you're not too old to have a kid, that doesn't mean you're as young and lively as you used to be. Let's go to your next doctor appointment together. I want to see how our new little blessing is doing. We went to the next appointment a month later. According to the ultrasound, the baby was doing just fine. That was actually the first time I had ever seen an ultrasound. It made the whole thing feel much more real. It sounds bad to say, but it felt a little strange to see my own child right there on the screen. While my wife was wiping off the ultrasound gel, I asked the doctor, I'm extremely happy to be having a child this late in life, but it also makes me a bit worried. Is it too soon to have a due date? Is there anything we should be careful of considering our ages? Is there anything in general we should know or should expect? The doctor replied, I can't say a specific date until your next checkup, but if I had to guess now, I'd say around the last few days of August or beginning of September. I thanked him and nurses, and we went back home. As soon as I got back, I circled all the days the doctor said on the calendar. Then I made a big list of things we had to do to get ready for the baby. That's when I realized something was off. It was March. My wife and I had our knot together a month earlier. How could her due date be in August? That's impossible. I brought this up to my wife. The doctor said that the baby could be here in August. There's no way. That's way too soon for a baby to be born. Her response was, It's common for women my age to have their baby a little bit sooner than normal. There's nothing to worry about. Even then, 6 or 7 months later is way too soon. I know that some children are born a little before the standard 9 months. But being born at 7 months, I've only heard that when there was an issue with a pregnancy and there was an emergency birth, There's no way a doctor would plan for a baby to come that soon. I went back and asked the doctor about this. I said after thinking about it, I was wondering why our baby is due in only 7 months. I know that my wife is older, and sometimes babies are born early for older women, but I just think that's way too soon. The doctor said, the baby seems to be very healthy at the moment. Your wife is in the 16th week of pregnancy. There's even a chance that she could have the baby sooner if things keep progressing the way they have been. It's nothing to worry about. Then it hit me. I knew something was off. This confirmed it. My wife and I slept together only a month ago. How could she possibly be 16 weeks pregnant? It was impossible. I thanked the doctor and left to go back home. I was zoning out thinking about everything on the drive home. It felt like I had been punched in the stomach. All the life was sucked out of me when I heard the doctor say that. I slowly figured out what must have happened. My wife lost her mind when she thought she uncovered my affair. I don't know if it was to try and get back at me or if she felt she had temporary immunity. She must have actually had an affair around the time she was accusing me of having one. She probably thought an eye for an eye. I wanted to confront my wife about what I knew. I had to find out who the other person was. The next day, we were watching our grandson. She asked me to put on a song for him while we were playing with him. I told her I didn't know how to play music with my phone, so I asked her to do it instead. She turned and said, "You're about to have a child of your own and you don't know how to do something that's simple? You need to get with the times." She shook her head and took out her phone. She put in her passcode and put on some cute children's music. As always, she was planning to go out in a little while. While she was out of the room, I looked through her phone. I looked at her recent call history and wrote down the names and numbers of the people I saw. Next, I opened up her text messages. The first name that came up was a man named Daniel. When I looked to see their conversation, I saw the picture of the ultrasound. They had been talking about the baby a lot. After my wife sent the picture of the ultrasound, the man said, "Are you sure? I'm worried about you having the baby at your age." My wife said, "I have every intention of having this baby and raising it myself. You don't need to worry about a thing. I already told my husband everything. We can talk in more detail when we see each other." That was the last text she sent. I put down her phone just as she was walking back into the room. I pretended like everything was fine. As soon as she left the house, I put Robbie into his baby carrier. I went out to follow my wife to see where she was going. Luckily, she didn't take the car to go out. She said she was walking to the butcher shop that was not too far from the house. I watched her walk into the butcher shop from afar. I stood there for a while, but she never came out. I couldn't just walk inside and blow my cover, though. I snuck up to the window and looked inside. When I looked inside, though, I didn't see anyone. I definitely saw my wife walk into the shop. I decided to open the door and go inside. The bells attached to the door rang and I walked inside. The butcher ran out from the back as he was buttoning up his uniform. He was out of breath as he said, "Hello, sir. How can I help you?" At first glance, he looked to be in his 40s. I said to him, "I'm here for a person. Not for meat." My wife must have recognized my voice. I saw she poked her head from what I thought was the office. We immediately made eye contact. She frantically slammed the door as I wouldn't notice. I ran to the door and opened it. My wife was laying in a bed and covered herself with a blanket. "What is this? Get out here," I said. The butcher yelled, "What are you doing? Who are you?" I yelled back, "I'm this woman's husband." His eyes widened and his jaw dropped. He yelled at her, "This is your husband? Get out here right now." I shouted at her again, "What is going on here?" "Explain yourself." "What are you doing here?" She said, "Well, I came to buy some meat. I just ended up in here." I screamed, "That doesn't make sense. You need to come out and bring Robbie home right now." After she left, I turned to the butcher and started questioning him. What's happening here? Don't try and lie to me. I know my wife is pregnant with your child. If you're not honest with me, I'll call my son down here and we'll get the answers we want out of you." The butcher started to answer my questions. Apparently, my wife was a frequent customer at his shop. He said he was married but got divorced not soon after. My wife heard about it and tried to help him get through it. He eventually became really attracted to her. That was over 2 years ago. That explained why she was constantly leaving the house every day. Their relationship grew deeper, and eventually she wound up pregnant. He said he never intended for things to get like this. "Things have gotten way out of control," he said. He also explained that there was another woman he was dating. He was planning to get remarried to her. That was, until he found out he got my wife pregnant. Now, he doesn't know what to do. I stood there speechless. She tried to embarrass me and accuse me of an affair when she was the one who was really cheating. A 50-year-old woman having an affair and getting pregnant. Have you ever heard of something like that? Not to mention, it was with a 40-year-old divorce butcher. My wife probably loved the fact that a much younger man was interested in her. Too bad she wasn't the only woman he was interested in. Unfortunately for both of them, the jig was up, and their little fantasy had come to an end. I wouldn't have ever imagined in my wildest dreams something like this would happen. I waited outside my house for my daughter-in-law to finish work and come pick up Robbie. When she came, I led her inside the house. My wife started sulking when she saw us walk into the house. I started to tell my daughter-in-law everything. The story the butcher told me, I told her about how my wife was pregnant, about how my wife tried to trick me into thinking the child was mine. I told her the truth about everything that was going on. I told her I've let a lot of things slide with her over the years. I've put up with more than I care to talk about. I can't let her get away with this. She's a psychopath. This is the last straw. I'm planning to get a divorce. I wanted to let you know. One more thing I forgot to mention. That butcher is planning to remarry the other girl he was seeing. I don't think your mother knows about that, though. My wife had been listening quietly from the other room. It seemed like she really didn't know about the butcher remarrying the other woman. She got up and called him right then and there. "I heard her tell him you told me we'd be together. I thought we agreed to start our life together after our baby was born, and I got divorced. What happened to all of that?" She shamelessly said all of this in front of my daughter-in-law. At least now the truth was out. My wife and I got a divorce not long after. A few months later, she had the baby. I heard the butcher never broke up with the other woman he was seeing. That led to a huge blowout between him and my wife. He led her on to believe that they'd start a new life together once their child was born. Instead, at 50 years old, she was divorced with a newborn and no one to help her. She had no idea what to do next. When a person finally settles into their life, they should be content with what they have. My wife did the opposite. She tried to control everyone around her, act selfishly, and do what she wanted. In the end, this was the result. Recently, I've been spending my days watching my adorable grandson. I'm living modestly on the money I saved for my retirement. Also, I'm suing the butcher for having an affair with my wife and causing our divorce. It shouldn't be much longer before I'm compensated for what he did. I plan on watching my grandson until he's old enough to go to preschool. After that, I think I'll try to find myself a new woman. Someone who I can travel with and spend my time eating delicious food with. Thank you for listening to my story until the end. I hope all of you are happy and healthy.